I grew up in a ministry home. When I was born, my parents were full-time children's ministry evangelists, and then when I was 8, they took a job in South Florida as children's pastors, and I grew up doing the best ministry in the world, which is ministry to kids. And I grew up doing that, and it's awesome because after I kind of grew up and went to college, I actually started traveling with my brother Mike. We went all over the country speaking at camps and churches. Went to college to study ministry. Then after college, I jumped to seminary. Met my wife Liz there at college, and we fell in love, and we had these dreams for our life. We had this picture of what our life would look like. And our plan was we were going to leave Lakeland. We were going to go start as a youth pastor or a college and young adult pastor at a big church. And in the middle of all of that, got married, and then my wife was diagnosed with stage 2 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So for 6 months, all of our plans came to a screeching halt. For 6 months, my wife courageously battled cancer through chemo. And it was just amazing what happened. It's like all of our plans were on hold, and yet God was doing something significant in our hearts.
During that 6 months, we fell in love with our city. And in December of 2005, I successfully completed treatment for cancer. It wasn't long after that we first started to feel in our hearts, maybe we're supposed to do something in Lakeland. Until finally one day I looked at Jason and I said, I think we should just start a church. And I think he probably thought I was crazy at first. And I even drew out on a napkin where I thought a good space in Lakeland that our church could be. And that was kind of the first little dreams and inklings and formations of what would become Access Church.
So from that hand-drawn napkin map that Liz made, we decided that we needed to do something. So we started meeting in my living room. But very quickly we realized that we needed to take this and expand it. We needed to go public. And so on Monday, March 19th, we were on Monday nights, we had our first real service ever. And we rented out a room at the Lakeland Center. Now the Lakeland Center was both amazing and terrible for so many reasons. It was amazing because we would always have a place to meet, but it was terrible because that complex is so unbelievably big. And so we started there and we never knew where we were going to be. In fact, we kind of came up with this motto along the way, which is, if you can find us, you'll love us, because we never knew where we would be. And we had our first service Monday night, March 19th, and I was just praying anybody would show up. And we were thrilled to have somewhere between 50 and 60 people show up. And I thought, this is great. We're gonna launch and have this massive turnout, and people will keep coming. And then next week, it was like half. And I had this faith, this trust that God would provide. And I'll never forget counting the first offering. It took about 3 seconds because the whole offering was $5.
I didn't tell Jason, I think, till later that I had given like $4, but that was our first offering, our first thing ever. Is a bunch of college students, and we were there to try to kind of all figure it out together week by week.
Man, when we started out, everything we had was really patchwork. We had a borrowed sound system, this really like rusty old screen, and everything was just really, it didn't really fit together. But what we kind of realized was this, that even though we didn't have the best of everything, people kept showing up, and it wasn't because of our music or our lights or anything like that. It was just because of this community that we were building, and it was something people wanted to be a part of.
And God did some amazing things at the Lakeland Center. In fact, I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for it because it gave us the place where we started. It gave us the place where we began to take form and for our ministry to take shape. And really, it was the place that God used to kind of be the launching pad for the next season of our church. What we realized was the college Bible study that we had started in our living room, for all of these people who were now coming, Access had become their church. And so we said, if it's a church, let's treat it like a church. And so we moved to Sunday nights, and quickly we needed a place that would be our own. And so the YMCA in South Lakeland was crazy gracious to us, and they let us use their back building. They have a kids building in the back that was perfect for what we needed. And the best part immediately was we had some stability. People would know where they could actually find us. And so people started coming, and it was kind of in this season that it felt like our church began to take focus, began to take shape. And all of a sudden we went from just being a handful of college students to young families coming. Now the gym was kind of funny. The gym was interesting because it had all the primary colors everywhere, and we tried to hide it as much as we could. So I got on Craigslist and I found a deal on the biggest screen I've ever seen. It was this massive screen. It took a team of us, the first time we set it up, it took a team of us almost 2 hours to set it up. We called it Big Bertha, and we had this love-hate relationship with Big Bertha. We loved how big it was, we loved how it looked, but it was a pain.
It was an absolute nightmare.
It was the most horrible thing that has ever graced this planet.
And a lot of amazing things happened there in that building. We had our first ever outreach projects that were really successful. We did a community back to school event that attracted hundreds of people. Like, a lot of great things happened when we were there in that back building of the Y. I even remember this was the season that we were able to make our first hire.
So Jason called me and said, hey, I need you to come join the team. And I was living in Virginia with my family at the time, and there just wasn't any money. And I needed a job that kind of paid. And I said, what can you give me? And he answered nothing. I said, then I can't come. And he called me again a couple weeks later. Hey, I need you to come. You need to be a part of this. You need to come down and join the team. And finally, after growth and things were really happening, he called me and said, I got a salary for you. I can give you $300 a month. And so my family packed up everything we had and moved to Florida to join the team.
And so Jay moved down. He was our first staff member. And together we were able to start doing more. And as we were doing more, the church began to grow.
And I remember specifically one Sunday night, some friends and I, we were greeting and bringing in more chairs and all kinds of things like that. But we weren't really paying attention to what the back gym looked like. And when we walked in, it was literally wall-to-wall people. There was no more aisles, there was no more room on the sides, and we just couldn't believe how many people came at that time.
Pretty quickly we realized that this space that we had wasn't working because we had outgrown it.
So we transitioned at the Y because all of a sudden we've got some momentum, we're growing. People are hearing about Access and they're inviting friends, and we moved to the front part of the Y.
We got there on the first Sunday that we were gonna meet in the front building of the YMCA. We were moving to Sunday mornings. This was gonna be a huge shift as we were becoming a church. And the very first Sunday we get there, we realized that they double booked us with the Polk County Senior Adult Swim Games. Now, think about this for a moment. I am preaching in a dark gymnasium, but I could see off in the back corner where the doorway was, there was an 80-something-year-old man standing, just staring at me, nodding along as I was preaching, wearing just a black Speedo. It was special times. A miracle happened for us there in the front building of the YMCA. All of a sudden, this dream that we had of a new kind of church community began to really just, the focus began to sharpen. And all of a sudden, like, hundreds of people started coming. And this little college Bible study that started in my living room was now attracting hundreds of people. I remember we did a series early on called Let's Fake Love. And it was a series on intimacy in marriage and what God's design for it was. And over the course of like 4 weeks, every week there was like 100 more people coming than the week before.
And so we capped off that series by having our first worship artist in. We had Jared Anderson lead worship with us that week. And I remember after worship joining with some of the other staff and some of the team members at Access who had started to pull in extra racks of chairs. And we started pulling in chairs from the lobby. We started pulling in chairs from people's offices to set up for all the people that were there. And I just remember during the service sitting up against the back brick wall of the YMCA, and all of us were just kind of looking at each other like, what just happened?
These transitions all started happening and it was all moving really fast. And then we said, we got to do something. So we went to 2 services. And when we went to 2 services, then all of a sudden we filled the auditorium up twice over. And it was cool to see this happening, but we had this problem. We were busting at the seams at the YMCA. And we knew we had to move. We knew we needed a bigger spot. And I'll never forget getting a call from my pastor friend in the city named David. And he said, hey, my church was meeting at George Jenkins High School. Is there any chance you'd be interested? And I said, let me pray about it. Yes, of course we would be interested. We needed a place to go. I'll never forget our first Sunday there at Jenkins. It's like instantly all the stuff we've been working on, now we had a place to kind of call our own, and the services were awesome. Worship was amazing. In fact, there at Jenkins, we had our very first night of worship.
And it was an amazing night. We were blown away by how our church came together and worshiped together.
Another thing that happened in this transition at George Jenkins was we just got more involved in doing things to serve the community. We began to do outreaches like Feeding Children Everywhere, where we've packaged tens of thousands of meals together in a day. Last year, for the first time, we did something called Serve Day. And in Serve Day, about 300 of us rolled up our sleeves and we got out in the communities in Lakeland and Brandon to just serve people. And all of those happened because of what happened that started at George Jenkins High School. Well, in around 2011, my wife and I took a trip to Europe, and I'll never forget this weird, almost sense of depression sat on me while we were there. And I'm in some of the most beautiful cities in the world, but I couldn't shake the sense that God was transitioning us and something was going to change. I didn't know what that looked like, but I remember coming home and talking to Liz and saying, I think God wants us to start another church. And in this time, I also went and talked to my pastors, the overseers of our church, and I said, I feel like we should do something new. And they said, don't leave and start something new, just start something new that's an extension of the beautiful church community you've already started. In that season, there was this book that kind of became the rhythm or the metaphor for what we were processing as a church. The book was called The Circle Makers, and we did a series called Circles. And in that series, I challenged our church with the phrase that Mark Batterson wrote that forever challenged me, which was that God honors bold prayers because bold prayers honor God. And as we were praying, we really felt like God said to circle Tampa. We had this sense in our heart that we should take everything we did at Access in Lakeland and just multiply it, do another one. And that's how the Brandon campus came to be.
In January 2013, we launched this new campus, and we've seen hundreds of lives changed, dozens of salvations and baptisms, lives being changed, marriages being restored, and God certainly doing what He promised in our hearts that He was going to do.
As I think back about the last 10 years, I am completely blown away by God's faithfulness to us. We've seen so many people make the decision to follow Jesus and to go public with their faith through baptism. I love stories of whole families getting baptized together on the same day. I mean, that's absolutely unbelievable to me. I believe our best days are ahead of us. I believe that we're going to see hundreds of students get connected in relationship and also get connected to their Creator through Access Youth. We've seen hundreds of kids come to faith in Jesus through Access Kids, which is really one of my favorite things we do. In fact, we had our first VBS this last year, and 200 kids came, and many of them encountered Jesus for the first time. I mean, God's done some amazing things in and through our church. We've sent teams of people all over the world, and that's just gonna keep happening. I'll never forget our first missions trip a few years ago to Chiapas in South Mexico. We built a church, and the highlight for me of the trip was standing on the stage at the dedication service where they handed the keys to a man in that church congregation who had prayed for years that God would give them a church. And we got to be the answer to the prayer that he was praying. Here's what I know. Jesus said he would build his church. You and I get to be the fulfillment of that promise. And because of your love, because of your generosity, and because of the way you ferociously serve people, with all of my heart, I believe, Access, that the best is yet to come.